Arif actually, he specialises in both topics, so please feel free to ask any questions. I'm the chair, so I'm not going to be answering any questions.
Oh, no, I think you are actually. Really? You don't know that you are as well. So if I can just by way of introduction and summary, so I guess that documentary was produced by Richard Denton, who sadly can't be with us for this session, although he was here at a session that we ran a few months ago. Was that last year? Yeah. Wow, time flies. And that was very useful to get his opinion. So he's very much an atheist, so his viewpoint was very much, I tried working out what was the most, this is quite what he said, that he said he tried working out what was the most realistic and rational explanation for the events of the crucifixion. And that was how he got onto the topic. And he actually said that, he actually got onto the topic when he was looking at the subject of Jesus having travelled in other countries. And I think that's when he got the idea, I remember now, he was talking about the Shroud of Turin actually. He said he's looked into Shroud of Turin, and there was one author, I think he's referring to a German author called Holger Kirsten, who had written on the Shroud, but had also linked this theory back to the crucifixion. And that book is called the Jesus Conspiracy, and it talks quite a lot about the Shroud and did Jesus survive the crucifixion, etc. And the same author wrote on Jesus in India. But what I wanted to give context was, obviously this is an Ahmadiyya Muslim Student Association event, so it's important, I think, to talk about what the Ahmadiyya Muslim viewpoint is on this topic and where we agree with what you've just seen, and touch on, I guess, where we disagree or where the differences are, so that you know which bits, because there's bits in that film I don't agree with, there's bits I mostly do. Just as an outline, what I'd like to do is just walk through from an Ahmadiyya Muslim viewpoint, and this will differ from a Christian viewpoint and a non-Ahmadiyya viewpoint. It will just explain where the differences are, just to kind of set the context. So if we take the narrative around Jesus' life, so let me skip over the virgin birth and a lot of other things, otherwise we'll be here for a long time. So let's fast forward to the crucifixion. So what was happening at the crucifixion? So the belief would be that Jesus was, as part of a sort of civil punishment inflicted under the hands of the Romans, he was being crucified. And at that point, let's pick it up from the Garden of Gethsemane. So the viewpoint would be that he was in a state of angst in the Garden of Gethsemane, praying that, please God, remove this cup from me. And we would take that to believe he was asking to be saved from this particular punishment. He felt he had a mission that required completion. He had things he still had to do. And his view was, his belief was that he needed to continue on. And in that passage, he asks his disciples that, he wakes them up, like, what are you doing? Get up and pray. And he prays very earnestly, and some descriptions talk about him sweating blood in terms of the depth of that prayer. So that's our interpretation around Gethsemane. We'll maybe go a little bit earlier back and talk about the sign of Jonah. So in at least 2 Gospels there's mentioned that about Jesus talking about the sign of Jonah, and he's asked that, I think he actually says that, you're asking me for a sign, I'm not going to give you any sign except the sign of Jonah. So it's clearly highlighted as the strongest sign of his truth, and he goes on to say that just as Jonah was in the belly of the whale for 3 days and 3 nights, so I will be in the belly of the earth. And again, our viewpoint would be that he's drawing a similarity with Jonah, who was another prophet who was preaching, and then, at one stage was very close to dying. He was swallowed up by a whale, as the story goes, and he was close to not being able to fulfill his mission, but then he was delivered from that after 3 days, is the story, and he was able to go on and fulfill his mission. And we believe Jesus was drawing that analogy because he felt and was prophesying the same thing would happen to him, in terms of he would be going into the belly of the earth for 3 days, and then he would return or emerge afterwards, and then go on to carry on his mission. That's our viewpoint there. In terms of what happened on the cross itself, so our viewpoint would be it was Jesus placed on the cross. It was not someone else placed instead of him or made to look like him. It was Jesus himself placed on the cross. And at the time his disciples left him, he was left and he was put on the cross for a short period of time. The film mentioned 3 to 6 hours, depending on which gospel narration. I think some suggest maybe even 9, but there's a short period there involved of less than a day at least. And then he was taken down early due to the fact that it was the Sabbath. And then he was taken into the care of Joseph Arimathea and Nicodemus. So that's the narration. So you might have heard other sort of the Orthodox Islamic viewpoint that some people talk about is someone being put on the cross in his place, often known as a substitution theory, but that's not the Ahmadiyya viewpoint on it. And also many other Muslims who are not have any association with the Ahmadiyya viewpoint also support this. We can go into that in more detail later. So then what happened next? We believe that Nicodemus and Joseph were able to then nurse him or tend to him The gospel itself talks about 100 pounds of aloe and myrrh, particular herbs mentioned. And then the post-crucifixion sightings, I think the film dwelt quite a lot on the fact that did it really happen? Was Jesus physically seen after the crucifixion or not? And I think even today, a lot of modern kind of Christian scholars, in terms of, so a lot of scholars seem to think that that part of the story is something added on afterwards. I've read quite a lot about people saying how, the original version of Mark, it ends at an empty tomb. End of story. That is where it actually ends. So I think that then causes a lot of confusion, or begs the question: if that really happened, how did Christianity spread, and how did what was the kind of miracle that led to it spreading? So our viewpoint would be very much that Jesus definitely appeared to his own disciples after the crucifixion, and that was certainly a miracle, and that was something that led to the spread of Christianity, and it was one of the most important bits that took place. So we take that as a physical event that took place. The fact that he ate with his disciples, the fact that they were able to see his wounds, etc., all for us points towards very much a physical occurrence in line with the laws of nature. What happened next? So we believe that then he had a mission to preach to the lost tribes of Israel, as was discussed in the film. They were scattering these tribes across the east. Again, we can talk about that topic. And so he continued on his mission. So after a period of time, he left the area. And again, if you look at when he's talking to his disciples before he leaves, currently sort of seen as in a pre-ascension narrative, the language used again is like, he's going away. They're asking, can we come? Like it was talked about in the film. And he's saying, no, I need to leave. I need to go away. Again, if you take it in a more everyday sense, it kind of makes sense that he was definitely leaving the area. And as was highlighted, it would make sense if he was a wanted person to remove himself from that area. And then we believe he travelled across to the east. And as we can talk about, I guess, in the next hour or so, there's kind of bits of information and evidence and references that are kind of scattered across that path from the east right through to India and Kashmir. And then there's a physical tomb in Kashmir, the Rosa Ball tomb that you briefly saw in that film there. And that is, our belief is that is the final resting place of the historical Jesus Christ. He took a name, or he was known in those areas as Yus Asaf, a slightly different name, but we believe it's a derivation from Jesus, and it was the same person. And there are documents and narrations that relate that it's the same person. One thing I want to highlight is the way we see things now, we see things in a very confused state, because the Orthodox Islamic viewpoint that is held very strongly is very much that many of them will say that they will say that Jesus was not placed on the cross, someone else was placed on the cross, and that God lifted Jesus to himself and saved him from the entire crucifixion ordeal, and that Jesus will return himself and the second coming, similar to the Christian viewpoint. So that tomb that you saw here is actually under Muslim ownership in terms of the people who look after that tomb, and they're very much a very orthodox viewpoint. So they when you have interviews of the locals and the tomb owners in other documentaries, they present a very confused view. So it's quite interesting. So they will talk about, this is the tomb of a prophet, he came from foreign land. Some will say he came from Egypt. I've seen one, someone traveled from Egypt, he was a prince prophet from another land. But if you were to say it's Jesus, they will strongly reject that, saying, no, that's not true. And Jesus is in heaven, ready to come back. So they have a very sort of an inconsistent kind of story where there's certain elements of what they say tie fully into this, but their personal belief is still against it. So you get some really strange bits of information about what is really believed there. The reason I highlight this is in about 3 or 4 years ago, a BBC news article was actually covering this story. And at one point they interviewed the locals, and their story was kind of like, well, not even the locals believe in it. We spoke to them, they don't even believe it. Christians, of course, are not going to believe it. Even the local Muslims don't believe it, so why should we? But it's there's sort of a bit more to that in terms of the overall kind of a story. And then, again, as we're Ahmadi Muslims, so the second coming of Jesus is where we have a very different viewpoint to the view expressed in the film. So the film was trying to say what Jesus really meant was he was going to go somewhere, when it was safe he would come back. But what we would draw on is the fact that many religions have a concept of a second coming, or a kind of a Messiah or figure coming towards the end of time, or the end days. It's a feature in the Christian tradition about the second coming. In the Islamic tradition, there's also the second coming of Jesus, and also another figure known as the Imam Mahdi. They are all pointing towards some figure coming towards the end of time, or the latter days, or the final days. But you see the same tradition in Buddhism, in Hinduism, in the second coming of Krishna. In Sikhism, there's some elements as well of continual coming of saints. So there's many elements that are all, I've even read about Eskimo tradition, about particular messiahs as well. So there's many elements or many religions that are looking for a common messiah, or messiah to come towards the end of time. And the founder of the Ahmadiyya Muslim movement in 1889 made the claim that he was the fulfillment of that role. That was his position. And it was based on that, after that, that there was research done into this particular topic. Because he claimed to have received revelation saying that particular physical Jesus, who he himself would have believed, I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong as well, feel free, but he himself would have believed that this was an Orthodox Muslim viewpoint, that Jesus, the same figure, will return. So when the revelations came to him that you are the fulfillment of that particular prophecy, and that same physical Jesus Christ has passed away, then afterwards there was research done about, well, if he has passed away, where did he die? Is there a physical tomb? And it was off the back of that the research was done. And Jesus in India was a book that he published. Here for the copy, we've got it here. So this is a book written originally in, I think it's 1809, or towards certainly, 1908 is what I'm trying to say, yeah. So towards the end of his life, he completed this book. There was due to be a second part, but this covers the research and outlines a route from Israel across to Kashmir with some particular references en route. So that is, I think I've covered it pretty much. That's the kind of the summary now. In the next, however long we have, we will obviously only be able to touch on some of those topics. So one thing I would say is the Tomb of Jesus website that I'm involved in tries to take a sort of a non-religious, non-dogmatic view on this evidence. So we have material from Muslims, from Christians, from Buddhists, Hindus, a wide variety of scholars, people of no religion, and it tries to collate all that information and present it in a non-religious way. So anyone interested in this topic, I'd recommend. Well, I reckon everyone. The fact you're here means you're interested. Go away and have a look at that website. It's tombofjesus.com.
What was it?
Tombofjesus.com.
Tomb of.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what it says on the tin. Should have had it on a nice big screen up there, but yeah. So that would be that website, and then also, this book, Jesus in India. I don't know if we've got more copies here, but we can certainly share that. It's available online as well, and although it's 100 years old, it kind of sets the foundations for a lot of modern books on the same topic. I'm going to stop now.
Thanks very much. That was actually needed. It's the kind of thing which I should have actually done. I was completely unprepared, so thank you very much. Do we have any questions from the audience, and we can?
Yeah, actually, I don't have any question, but it's my view
Sure.
on the making of the movie.
Yeah.
I really appreciate the documentary.
So could you speak up, mate?
Okay. I really appreciate the making of this documentary, partly because there are a number of questions that have been raising these days, and they haven't got any answer so far. So the question still continues, which have been in the past. My comment on the view was that the approach that the filmmaker have been using was professionally and on scientific based. And to my experience, such a thing might be good if it is approached religious based, like if some pioneers on the religion could be part of the religion, so that the interview might have been a little bit more fact-based. One thing I would like to add on this is about the True Cross. Part of the True Cross is still found in my country, in Ethiopia, and yearly a number of pilgrimages, they go there and to celebrate the founding, and they get some blessing out of these True Cross. It's a reality and still available, and I recommend the filmmaker to go and do this documentary.
So I think the point was maybe perhaps more of a religious viewpoint should be taken, analysing the question. I mean, you said it would be more fact-based on that basis. So do you have?
Yeah, no, I'd say you can probably see that the guy the background of the person was quite atheist. So I think it quite I find it quite a provocative